Hello, my friend. How you doing today?
Hello, I'm great.
I'm still a little under the weather, but I couldn't resist. I gotta push through this crap. So welcome to the show. I'd really love to hear you let the audience know, some of your backstory, how you ended up to be where you are at this point in time.
Yeah, man. I'm really excited about this, and I'm really looking for a piece of notebook that I had, but I scramble around last minute trying to get everything ready. You know how it goes. So, a lot. Where do you start?
At the beginning, brother, we got friggin' 2 hours, so we got plenty of time.
Well, yeah. Well, there's one of the beginnings was actually a book that was brought to me in about 2003, and it was called Natural Cures They Don't Want You to Know About. And it was written by Kevin Trudeau. And that book it opened a veil, it shed light on this whole pharmaceutical complex, all of the things they're doing to the air, the waters, and about it taught you how to heal yourself using food, and just pointed out so many of those things. And then I was led to Baker Creek, Jerry Gettle down there at Baker Creek, Heirloom Gardener flyer was coming out. It was a journal. It was coming out, a paperback, and it come out like quarterly. And I was eager. I still have most of them. I think I'm missing a couple, but I have all of those. I was so eager when they came out. I would just devour them. Frankenfood News and all of the, information that they were sharing, and information about how to garden and how to build, a more sustainable life. And that's my mind just takes me all over the place when it comes to this stuff, man, because it grew as a passion. I do concrete construction, and I have. So about that time as well, I was starting a concrete construction business. That's in 2000 when I actually started that. And then, so I was playing around with gardening and composting, and, I didn't know a lot about it at the time. I had a little tumbler, and I was doing little stacks, and never really used a lot of it. Never, I did, but there wasn't much. And I had a little bit of success gardening here and there with some tomatoes and peppers. Always seem to be good kickers around here. They just do well, and they're hard to not do well on them. But some years are better than others. So I had some successes along the way. And then, like I say, through Heirloom Gardener and through Jared Gettle, I went down, my brother and I went some years later to a festival that they had. And I met up with some people there and learned about more of the aquaponics and how the fish, interact, how the manure aquaponics, you know all about that stuff. So without going into all of that, I learned a little bit about it, never got into it, just knew about it, and learned things about chitinase, chitin and its relationship to the immunity of plants and things like that. So that's always been instilled in my mind. And just probably a few years ago, well, there's a lot of stuff in between there that's, personal paths that take us where we end up, life's experiences. They harden us and they teach us, we can take advantage of every situation, look for the good in that situation and grow from it. So none of what has happened, do I ever have this, oh, woe is me, losing my mom when I was 16, losing my son when he was 20. Those hard knocks come, and there's a lot more than that, that divorce and children not talking to me for years over being mad at me, and mending relationships and trying to have a relationship currently, and maintain that on a satisfactory level for both of us. All of that is it's a juggling act. So, but it never let me put aside my passion. I always said when I grow up, I want to be a farmer. And I knew what that looked like. And, a lot of people just think, oh, you want to be out on a tractor in a field all day? It's like, no, that's and not what I'm talking about being a farmer. But that's where the passion is the food, and knowing that the food is medicine, and then of course herbs, all of the plants that are provided. And I know that what it takes to have quality food is quality soil. And so a few years back, I was on the scroll box, and there popped this soil food web school. And I remembered Dr. Lane from a lot of my early training and teaching that I didn't carry through very well with. But, Dr. Lane is obviously, she is, she's something to be revered, she's a treasure.
Absolutely.
Really is. And I got to meet her, so there's that. We'll jump into that story in a little bit. And it was the same time I met you, actually, Leighton. So Elaine, Soil Food Web School, I signed up. And it's been, over 2 years, and I'm still in the program, and I've still got just one simple test to pass to be certified. I say simple, but my computer skills and my videography are yet to be refined. And this YouTube stuff's helping me out a lot on that. So, what is Dirt-Rite, right? What does that have to do with all this? Dirt-Rite is the company or the entity, the assembly, the convention, it is the group that is working toward saving the world, simply put. That's a really large calling, and a lot of people kind of have a weird connotation when you say that. It's like, oh, everybody's already tried that. But the thing is, it's different this time.
I hear you, bro.
We're raising the frequency. We're raising the bar. And this is how it's happening right here through these connections that are being made. It's all about the biology, just like you just posted it up. And that's really what brought it all into all of this. That's where I got the name, it's all about the biology is the reason that I got a YouTube channel, so that I could be involved in this program and in this airing that is so important, and I appreciate you doing what you do. I appreciate you seeing a spark in me and asking that I share. I said, I'm not ready, and, we're working toward having products and having, market availability soon. We're not too far from it. So this inspires me to do better, work harder, and just really get into it,
Yep, I'm into that. I like to say, I'm not here to save the world. I'm more here to rebuild the soil. The world's going to be fine. It's the human race that's going to lose.
And that specifically is what I'm targeting. Yeah, just humanity. My goal, the way I see it is if enough people know about composting, not everyone has, okay, let me back up. Everyone has a role in composting because we all produce waste. So each human needs to know what composting is. The more people, if enough people know what composting is, then the world will change for the better, for sure. If enough, we don't know that number yet. So if we keep pushing and we keep trying and we keep sharing and we keep making our methods more and more economical, if you will, because some of these efforts that we put in are they're taxing. Some of the things that we do seem to yield small results in the front. I've been hauling a lot of material around, expending fuels and time loading and sorting and sifting and just doing the things that I'm doing to learn how to do it easier and faster and better. the windrow turner is really been a game changer. We're just finally getting set up to be able to really utilize the compost turner properly at the lot where we're setting up. We've got over 200 yards of material gathered now, and I'm working on getting them preconditioned. We're still setting up watering system, and I took advantage of the rain, went down and aerated one of the rows of, all the rows, but they're starting to heat up, took on some moisture. You know how it is when manure and things sit around like that. So we got to monitor that even before we put them together to be composted. And we'll still be working on ratios, because some of these ratios are really difficult to figure out. It's not just pull up a Google search and say, what's the carbon to nitrogen ratio of a pile of wood chips? Where to come from? How do we know? We don't. Is it heating up? That'll tell you a lot. So. And then we look for diversity, obviously. So we want to incorporate as many different. We've got wood chip piles that we've maintained, and that's all they were, is wood chip piles. I was just maintaining them, keeping them from going anaerobic, and I was wetting them. It got to the point where I was finally able to wet them up a little bit and stay on top of it. And I brought them up to moisture, and one of these piles, it turned 6-7 times. And it was just wood chips, but it had leaves, and so there's whey meal, obviously, because just wood chips, science tells you, carbon to nitrogen ratio, that's not going to compost. Well, it was compost. It was heating up, and it was definitely composting, and it is, and it shows good biology. So some a lot of times biocomplete. So that's pretty. We're bouncing around again. That's how I do.
You're good. You're good, brother.
The certified lab tech, that's going to be that's going to be great. And then the consultancy training will begin after that. So I'll be working with Brian Dobbins-Peck. He's a mentor, and he's done miles of windrow composting. So that's good. And he's been involved in regenerative ag farming and cattle and graze land, and that's one of the things we want to really target with Dirt-Rite is grasslands. We want to make grass great again, so that will in turn make the beef great, and it will in turn make our health better. So that's going to be one of our targets for sure. I'm gonna stop talking for a second.
All right, dude. It's good to let you spool up, man. So, yeah, when I first started talking to you, you were, playing with these little piles, and you just started getting these bigger piles together. And, I remember talking to you about, like, all right, well, what is the weather like down there? And you explained to me, well, we get a lot of moisture and very humid. And I'm like, dude, you're in the ultimate environment, because, you have that natural humidity as well as the annual rainfall that allow you to compost anything. And I remember you were saying, like, well, how does that all make sense? It's just chips. And I'm like, give it a minute, right? Give it a minute. And I'll be honest with you, like where I work now at Peach Hill Soils, they have a pile of green waste that is probably 30-40 feet tall. And it's just piles of, green waste that have been dumped there, and they have to water it because it starts to cook. And so, the seed end ratios are a lot less important in composting than a lot of people realize. It's kind of like I don't know. It's one of those things that was taught as God, that your seed end ratio is the most important thing. If it's at this 20-1, it's considered finished. If it's 40-1, it's considered, still very immature. But some of the things that I've seen over the last few years in some of these more advanced tests are all over the map. I mean, we did a program or a project with Agriman where we were able to get a C to N ratio out of a material. We call it GOM, ground up organic matter, but only using biology. In other words, we did what's called control. So we tested the pile that we were using, and then we applied, I think it was 10 gallons of muncher juice to another pile, waited, I think it was 20 days, and sent them off again side by side. And their pile was classified as very immature. I think it was 35 to 1. And our pile, which is the same material, the only difference was the biology, was down at 17 to 1. And so this is the thing that, like, I try to explain to people, is that it's a lot more. It's more about what's living in the compost than the actual matrix itself. I mean, you try to explain that, right? How can it be that biology alone drove the C to N ratio down? If anything, it should have driven the nitrogen up, right? And it should have heated up even more. It should have cooked. But in reality, it's now you're getting into predation. So the only way that nitrogen is released is through the nutrient cycling system of the protozoa eating the bacteria and then releasing it plant available. Well, there's no plants, right? So, this just goes to show you that we still have so much to really learn or find out about these relationships between the organisms and the matrix, the material itself. Because, again, at the end of the day, I've used like 2/3 green, 1/3 browns. That should have lit up like a friggin' Roman candle, but it didn't, because even in the greens and the browns, there's a C to N ratio. And sometimes these greens are higher in nitrogen or higher in carbon than they are in nitrogen. So that's why when we talk, I'm always diversity, 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 because the more diverse you get, the more likely you will get to a sweet spot where you're pretty much hands off. You're a slow cook, right? You're not worried about pathogens. You're using wood and wood chips and leaves and stuff like that. So you're not concerned about the fact that there's E. coli or salmonella or Shigella, any of these pathogens in that scenario. Now, when you get into manures, it's a little different, obviously. You have to be a little bit more careful about making sure you get to temperature, so you don't have to worry about it. But even then, dude, look at me. I've been playing with anaerobic fish shit. When you put that stuff under the microscope, it's loaded with spirochetes, those little twisty corkscrew.
Fast movers.
Yeah.
Like all Vibrios, spirochetes, and spirilla, all the ciliates, all the bad guys. I call them fast movers. Like when I started seeing my stuff go anaerobic, I'm like, there are a lot of fast movers in there. Sometimes I don't know what they are, like the little bitty ones. I don't know if they're a Vibrio or a spirilla, but they're just moving so fast that that little rocket tail, like a tadpole. They look like a little tadpole sometimes when they're there. But yeah, and I've been paying attention to my extracts as they age, and I'll see some. I'll look at them 3, 4, 5 days later, and just watch the development of the change, or just see the change as it goes into the anaerobic condition, and even on my slide, I've watched all these, they were spirochetes. They were like waking up. They were just laying there in cyst, because I'd seen them days previous, just these little C-shaped. I was like, what are these? They just look like a little C, and like a fungal hyphae, but with no, just like the design and the shape, no traits of fungal hyphae. But then a couple days later, I was seeing them, and there was the slide was drying up, and the air bubble was coming over, and they were all kind of stuck right there. They just started waking up, boom, and they would start wiggling, and they'd take off, and you just watch, and you'd see them, So as the oxygen I guess, well, no, maybe the oxygen was getting to them. So I don't know what was going on, but they were waking up from that change in condition right there,
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, it's
crazy.
It's pretty badass to have the tool, right?
Yeah.
I think that it really opens up a whole new world to the people that do have the patience to climb behind a microscope and really learn at what you're looking at. But talk about the ability to understand between these gradients of aerobic, anaerobic, and the world of facultatives in between. I got in a lot of trouble early on when I was down with Elaine because I was playing with facultative anaerobes, and she did not like that because of what had happened to her in the past. But I kept telling her, I'm like, Elaine, I can turn these synthetic fields around a lot quicker when my first application is in the middle between aerobic and anaerobic, probably around 5 parts per million oxygen. And then after I've applied these facultative anaerobes, and I come back a few months later and apply a full-on aerobic, man, that field explodes. And I've done it the other way too. Like I've done it where I did a full aerobic from right out of the gate, and then waited a couple of months and did another aerobic, and I didn't come close to the same results. And so this is one of those things that I try to explain to people. Like, look, as long as you're have good intentions, you're being responsible. Sometimes it's okay to let that tea go a little long, especially if you're dealing with a synthetic field, something that has been.
Well, yeah, and like when I look in there and I'm still seeing in that same field of view, I might still see 3 to 6 amoeba, and then there's a flagellate, and there's fungal hyphae, and there's a piece of biochar right there, and it's like that's when I've really noticed a difference now is using the biochar and the EM1 with everything, and that's where the diversity. If you look at any of these products, and I honor and admire each and every individual and company and group that has been represented, especially on this channel. And they each on their own right have proven statistics, anecdotal data, whatever, white papers, some of them that show this particular product works. EM1, fish brew, the chlorella, all of these different products that are working biochar, a couple of different biochar companies, the wood vinegar, it goes on and on, the muncher. So now, that's what I've created. What I haven't created it, but it's what I call the kitchen sink consortium, because, and why that, I don't know, because it's got everything but the kitchen sink, but that's why I call it the kitchen sink consortium, because, everybody knows like, oh, everything but the kitchen sink. So whatever I have on hand, like my box, I'll just put each of them respectively as like EM1. I'll put an ounce per gallon. I'll just put that in there. I'll put an ounce of some fish brew in there per gallon. I'll put an ounce of my extract. I'll put an ounce, and I'll just put an ounce of this, ounce of that, and diversity. And that's, this has just been going on for a short period of time. So all I can do is just see what's going to happen. But, some of my soils, I can't say that I have success all across the board, because I don't know the reason, I guess. But I know for one thing, like I built so many beds around this place in the last year and a half that the material was impossible to come up with. So it's like every time you go to build a raised bed, like, oh, I need something. I need some dirt, right? I got to find some dirt. So I'm running around getting whatever I have. And like whatever's available, I'll throw a little bit in. And it's like, just don't have enough compost at the time, and now we're starting to get to where we have more compost, and now I've inoculated the place more than a few times, and the biology is really increasing. That's another thing I wanted to kind of get into, is just about how compost, we talk about it all the time, but I want to share my story. Compost is not just compost. When I first got the microscope, I was eager to get a hold of something that's biocomplete. You know, I want to see, I've been learning this stuff in school, and I'm seeing, hearing about this and this many numbers of amoeba and flagellates and nematodes and all these great soil food web organisms. I want to see all this. I was really bummed for a long time. I spent a lot of time searching just products on the shelves, searching my yard, searching places I'd see some things, and it was rarely even close to biocomplete. I mean, rarely even close to being somewhat excited about what I'm seeing. And it's taken a little while to get good at hunting the microbes. That's something definitely tuning in on, being the probe hunter, living that probe life. So
love it. Yeah, one of the tricks that I've learned really early on is I had a really good friend of mine. We've been worked on projects together as partners. He was an avid hunter, and so I was not a big fan of killing shit, but I loved to go hunting with him. He called me his loyal retriever, because I'd go out in front and bump the deer, and they would come running past him, and he would pop them. And of course, I do enjoy some venison. It's delicious. I'm just not a big fan of killing shit. Needless to say, I started noticing what is called prevailing wind, and that was something that he taught me about, was like understanding, like he wanted me to walk in this direction because I was upwind of the herd of deer or the buck that he was hunting, whatever, and he would circle around and come in so that he was downwind of the prey, and so they couldn't smell him. And so I started using that early on in when I walked about down at Rodale, doing exactly what you're talking about, which is microbe hunting. I would go to a blowdown, which is a tree that's on its side, or old stone wall, or any kind of blockade, whether it's a small dirt bluff or whatever. And then you'd notice that there would be a leaf litter pile on the opposite side of the prevailing wind. And if you go to those spots and you root around, you'll see, oh my God, this stuff is out of control. As far as, nematodes, flagellates, amoebas, it's nuts. I started calling it forest inoculant. And Elaine had warned me that, she goes, look, just be careful about encouraging people to do this, because you can get a bad reputation as you're stealing stuff out of the woods to make your compost better. And I was like, Elaine, that's a really valid point. If I'm going to encourage someone to do that, I'm going to encourage them to bring in a bucket of compost, whether it's mature or not, or even if it's just chips or hay, it doesn't matter. But wherever you harvest from, you place back. Don't leave a scar, cover it up. Be respectful about nature, because if you're not, you could end up getting yourself in a little karmatic jam. And so and that was something that I always preach to people, is that if this is something you're going to do, do it respectfully, responsibly, and in tune, not in abusive manner. And dude, I started going like all over the place collecting samples. Like I even once took samples from a desert halfway between Phoenix and Tucson. I was rooting around underneath cactuses and other plants, again looking for the signs of prevailing wind, and then finding where the material would pocket up. I remember grabbing a couple baggies and hopped on a plane, and I didn't think twice about the fact that I had 2 bags of brown shit in my carry-on, and of course I got stopped and probably got really close to a cavity search until I explained to the guys, look, this is not heroin, this is not drugs, this is fucking soil. It's a forest or a desert inoculant. And interestingly enough, dude, like as soon as I got that stuff hydrophilic, so to accept moisture, like this stuff was so hydrophobic, you could throw it in a vial with water, 1 gram of soil, 9 or so grams of water, shake the shit up, and everything just floated right to the surface.
Yeah, it takes forever to.
Yeah. So this stuff would take, often a couple of days, sometimes even 3 days before it would settle down to the bottom. But as soon as it settled to the bottom and you microscoped it, loaded with life, fucking loaded with life. So it goes to show you that there's life everywhere. You just have to be mindful and responsible about where and how to collect it. But I think that's, again, where you live in that wooded area is probably got pockets all over the place of these very, very intensive microbial communities.
Yeah, for sure. These are some pretty old growth forest around here that some of this was preserved from early in the city's founding, as a parkway system. And a lot of these areas haven't, not that they haven't been touched, but they're kept pretty decently pure for the most part. There's a group of tall evergreens. They must be 80 to 100. We call it the Ewok Village. It's just about less than half a mile from here down on the parkway. And there's a stretch probably an acre or two, it's 100 or 200 feet wide between two roadways and 300 or 400 feet long. It's just massive. I went in there one time early I didn't really know what I know now about collecting. I just hopped out of the truck and went in there and just kind of, my instinct probably wasn't as good at the time. I dug around and brought something back and didn't see much. And I didn't know exactly. I feel like at the time I probably knew a little bit about what I was looking at, but I didn't see much there, but there was probably something that was important,
Yeah, again, it's all about like hunting, like you said, being a good sleuth and really thinking about what you're collecting and where you're collecting it.
Yeah.
I've seen some really incredible things in places that you wouldn't ordinarily think there was much life. And that was, some of these creeks that are choked out by algae. That algae is amazing. Like there's so much life associated with algae. I encourage people to, collect it, throw it in a bucket, put it out in the sun once it starts to foam up. That white foam is just friggin' loaded with flagellates.
That brings me up to something I really wanted to kind of discuss, and that's rainwater with you. Because like right now, I've got to get my rainwater collection game stepped up. Just got some of these structures built, just put some of the gutters on. And right now I've just got a 30-gallon black open drum sitting under the gutter. It's open gutter, it collects the water. And, that 30 gallons usually gets used up before it gets nasty. Well, this last round, it was smelling funny. I scoped it and I didn't see anything alarming. But it smelled. And there was green algae on the sides of the barrel. So it's like, I don't know which algae's good, which algae's bad. How do you know? Usually they say your nose so that you know. And but it smelled like fish. Like it didn't smell like horrible. Like, it just smelled. It was strong and I don't know. So we used a couple of them and I cleaned out the barrel and we're starting over on that little venture, getting some more new, but I don't know. What you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it's funny. The nose does know. And when I was early on, and I was running around collecting fish manure, some of it was like horrific how bad it smelled. And then I started noticing that it had a little bit less of that funk to it, that it took less time to aerobically stabilize it. And that's when I went back to one of the fish farmers or aquaculturists that I became friends with. And I said to him, I'm like, hey, I bet you I can make your fish look even better, because he sells in a live market, by cleaning up some of these filters. I go, to be honest, do you really need that biofilter? Because it's just caked with shit. I said, when was the last time you changed your sand filters? And he goes, I don't even know. It's been forever. So I'm like, well, let's do an experiment on one of the systems. He had 12 systems. So I said, on pick one, I don't care which one. Let's get all the fish out of there, clean them up, decouple the biofilter completely, just get rid of it, because all it does is collect fucking solids. And I go, let's pump one of these friggin' sand filters out and change it. And he did. And after about a month, what I noticed was that not only were his fish super healthy that were in there, the colors were amazing. And he even said to me, he goes, Leighton, I've never seen my fish eat this well. And I go, that's because, there's no anaerobic pockets in this system. And then after that, he literally went through every single one of them. But the interesting thing was, when I collected the manure from that system, it didn't have the funk. It had this like very faint sweet smell to it. And that's what led me down the path of saying, okay, when I start to smell that sweet smell, I know that I'm aerobically stabilized. Now, it may not smell sweet to some people. Like I remember talking to Keith Wild about this years and years earlier, and he was the same. He could smell it when it smelled sweet. He knew that the fish were going to be really super healthy in that system. So when your nose tells you something like, oh, this has got a little funk to it or a little twang, it's just an indication that you're in probably a more facultative state. You're probably somewhere between, say, 3 and 7 parts per million oxygen. But that's not to say that it's horrible. It's just that you're in a zone that you need to be a little bit more careful about what you apply it to, because you definitely don't want to apply that to something that's very aerobic. You're stepping it backwards, because a lot of times those facultative anaerobes will eat flagellates as well. Have you ever seen a rotifer, the guys, the street sweepers that sweep stuff into their mouth?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, those are facultative, right? But in having those present in your or putting them in or into an aerobic situation, they're not going to stop to not eat the flagellates. They're going to eat the bacteria and the flagellates, anything that gets in them. So that's why it's really important.
They're still nutrient cycling. So like you say,
yeah.
Don't get me wrong to that stage where, all you see is spirochetes and spirilla and ciliates, and it's like, okay, that's probably bad. That's not good, But
right.
When it's just starting to go that way, and you still see tons of amoeba, flagellates, and all the other oxygen players, and I mean these amoeba are really active. They're outside the bubble, munching, living it up. So there's nutrient cycling taking place, and they can't thrive if where you're putting it is, say, the surface of a garden or a surface of a potted plant. Typically that's pretty dry, for the most part. You're adding it to an environment that's not anaerobic, so they can't thrive. They're just food for the fodder. They're more nutrient cycling while they live, and they're not going to make it very long. So I guess like you say, it's just kind of one of them. And then there are steps I can take to obviously slow down that process. And then I want to figure out how to incorporate fish into that system. And I don't know, and I want to use the fish water. We're going to have a deeper conversation about that in the near future as I get set up with, storing the water and storing the fish and utilizing them together is what I want to do.
So do you ever get down in the single digits where you live, or even below freezing?
Oh yeah. In the wintertime, there might be 2 months of where we're going to have. Now, we don't typically stay there for more than a week at a time, but sometimes we get 2 or 3 week spells where we barely come out of the single digits.
So it's going to be important then for you to either have it like in a heated barn or a basement, greenhouse.
Up in the hoop house is what I'm thinking. And I got a fireplace up there that I'm probably going to get, running. But the garage, I might start actually in the garage. It'd be a lot easier maybe, and just do like 2 300-gallon totes. And like I say, so I just need to figure out, do I store fish? How do I store fish and use that water and constantly be bringing in new water? It seems like there's got to be a separation there somehow, process the water, use the water out of the fish tank, and then let it come in as you use it, I guess.
So there's some great little aquaculture systems out there where you have radial flow filter. So you're taking the water from the bottom of the tank. All right, this is important. Ideally, there's round, flat tanks. Round, flat bottom tanks are ideal. The only problem is you'll have to build it up because you have to put a what's called a bulkhead fitting on the bottom and the center, because there's where you want to pull the water out. And then you run that through a radial flow filter, and that pulls all the solids out. That's what I started with, because that's my goal, was to collect my own fish waste, and that was fantastic. And we can get into detail on that.
Yeah. And I've got notes and details. I've got a sketch of a radial flow filter that I came up with, and that's
nice.
the things I was going to bring up when we talk in the future, to kind of show you that, see if there's any tweaks and additions and that thing, So yeah, I just want to touch up on that.
Yeah, and then you just put that water, you bubble it after it goes through the radial flow, and then put it right back in the tank, and that way you're not, every gallon you're taking out of the system, you're just collecting the fish manure, and then you can take that and add water to that, so you don't have to constantly add a tremendous amount of water back to the fish tank. It is important to brighten, though, like 5% fresh water, every time you collect, is good, because there's minerals in that they definitely need, and they strip the water if you don't brighten it. They literally strip the minerals out of it, and you'll notice they start to not eat as much. They're not as healthy looking. They start to get sores sometimes, especially around the mouth. But yeah, I'm a big fan. I think that every farm should have some kind of aquaculture system, and even if it's only running from spring till fall, and they shut it down and then start it back up the following spring, and you can get there's all kinds of different fish. You can get koi, tilapia. These are
tilapia. That's
I'm
sending me.
Yeah, tilapia are beautiful, man. They're like really very, very handsome fish.
They're yummy too, right?
Yeah. They don't have a lot of flavor to them. They're not high in omegas, which is a bummer, because that's really one of the really health benefits of eating fish, is that you're getting those omegas. But there's still it's a good eating whitefish, right? You can always add seasoning and salt and stuff to get some flavor out of them. But yeah, they're an easy fish. Those things jump out of the tank, and you catch them flapping around on the ground. Just pick them up and throw them right back in the tank. They'll take off.
Yeah. Koi, yeah. Do they produce a lot of the fish manure waste that we want to? All fish.
So tilapia and koi are very similar in the volume that they eat and the volume that they poop. So, and again, at the end of the season, like if you have koi outside, you can bring them back to the pet shop and actually end up making money, because you're selling them bigger fish than what you got when you started.
Yeah, that's a good market to get into right there. Because obviously, with what we're doing, so, I do concrete construction right now, and I've set myself up with some debt, and I'm working toward releasing that. I've got a home mortgage, and there's some business things that need settled up. So I'm hoping, to work to the point where we're caught up on that stuff, and I can transition out and into regenerative agriculture, permaculture, ecosystem building, all the above. And that's essentially what is culminating now, because I've just seen the importance, the spark has really been ignited here recently, because like I say, it's all just culminating to this. I'll tell you what really hit, and a lot of time's gone by, but just a year ago, we met at the soil summit. What was that? Soil Life Summit.
Was it the one in Vegas?
Yeah, in Pahrump, Nevada.
Yep.
Yeah, so that is where I met you for the first time, and I learned the horizontal layers. I went through your course, and then your courses outside. And wow, got to meet with Elaine, have dinner with her and chat, and Catalyst group over there. Adam over in the UK, like, man, just some of the greatest minds, in my opinion, in this, Steve Cantwell, what he's doing out there, Green Life. I mean, he's modeling where we want to, a good portion of what we want to be doing is going to be similar to that. I want to get to the point where we're making enough compost to where we can make enough food for ourselves and then make enough food for other people, and be able to share and teach people to make it, and teach people to make compost and make available just a lot of these materials that just aren't. Like I got sidetracked when I was talking about trying to look for all the microbes in all the different compost and things that I buy, even at the grow shop. Some of the compost, I haven't been back down there in a while, or down there anywhere. I haven't looked at some of these big commercial popular composts that I'm not going to just start naming, but I did look at several of them throughout that time period, and most of them were pretty barren of life. So I know the need is there for what we're doing. And so just when I started looking for some, I ordered some from Catalyst Bioamendments back then, and I got it, just a box, it was like $60 delivered to my door, and like a cubic foot. And I saw what I was looking for. That's what it took. It was like, okay, so this is the difference. This is the real deal. And so I use that obviously to inoculate what I'm doing. It could be a great reason why we're kickstarted to where we are. And I know that they claim that there's this, I don't know about danger, but I guess this thing that, indigenous microorganisms. And we've talked, or I've heard you talk about this recently on the program, how indigenous is kind of overrated because, anything that got anywhere, man has manipulated things so much throughout time, and we've eradicated things, we've added things, and I don't know how important that is. If something's going to thrive, it's going to thrive, and that's just how it's going to be. And if it won't, it'll disappear. It might have been a catalyst or a kickstart to making something else happen. And so that I got over that real quick as far as, mixing the microbes. I'm back to that diversity thing. I think the more the better, just get as much diversity.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. I mean, that's the key. Like one of the things that, again, when I was early on down at Rodale, Elaine was warning me about, well, you don't want to take compost from the East Coast and bring it to the West Coast. It's probably not going to work. And also, there's this concern that you're going to create some kind of invasive situation. And my complaint to her was, well, hey, Elaine, what was it like, say in the 1600s, right? Man's traveling, right? We're in boats and we're sailing all across the oceans, and we're bringing plants and rafts and everything else with us all over the place, right? And so, we by default essentially spread shit everywhere from everywhere. And I said, all right, Elaine, let's take it back even further. Let's go back 10,000 years, right? When there were very few humans, but there was an incredible abundance of animals. Like when those animals herded from one place to another, well, they were spreading those microbes all over wherever they went. And if you think about birds and migration, well, geez, they migrate, some of them like thousands of friggin' miles, right? Well, it's the same thing. Like, aren't they traveling with microbes, both what they ate, which is in them, or what, is on them, whether it's on their feathers or their hair or their feet? So who's to say that this isn't a natural occurrence, like that these microbes are getting transported all over the earth? And then I brought up the NASA study that was fresh off at that point in 2011 about the study they did on the Sahara sands actually fertilizing. At that time, they were talking specifically about phosphorus, but the Sahara desert sandstorms would bring phosphorus over to the Amazon. And so I got her mind going a little bit more toward, all right, we have less of an issue with potentially invasive. If the microbes aren't going to live there, well, then they're food for somebody else. And then more recently, we get into the horizontal gene transfer and biosymbiosis. And so we now know that we're not being invasive. We're actually supporting evolution by giving these microbes from the East Coast to the West Coast an opportunity to engage in these types of activities with the microbes that are present. And they're always can trade tools, right? And again, I don't think there's any concern about creating an invasive microbe. I really don't. I think all we're doing is
memory transfer.
Yeah, encouraging or enhancing.
That's something that's really been laid on me. Like, sorry about that. I had to get this out. Memory transfer. Those are the DNA and all RNA. I am not a deep scientist on all that stuff, but I do know that all of that stuff contains memory. And when it's transferring memory. And that's what is happening right now to me. And that's what's happening to us as a collective, is we are remembering. We're being awakened. So many, they say, it seems so cliche and everybody's sleeping and we need to wake up. Well, literally, like, we're being shown things. And if we are in alignment with the universe, with God, with the planet, with all of each other, and we are vibrating positivity, we're vibrating love, we're vibrating high frequency energy, then we're awakening. And this is happening through these microbes. Like I say, all this biology that's been coming to me through me seeking it, it's coming to me. I mean, even psilocybin, cannabis. I mean, this stuff has memory too. And as we dive into these strains and we start hunting, and you smell them, and it's calling to you like that. That's what I'm looking for right there. That's the medicine I need, and it just brings you into this homeostasis, and you just get more and more in tune. And as we dive down the rabbit holes of, staying away from these toxins and just only bringing in and fostering great life in our bodies through these products. And, that's what we seek to do, is as we develop all of our processes to become dim pure, essentially, dragonfly earth medicine. Got to meet those great folks out there too. And man, meeting you guys on a platform like that, or in a scenario where I wasn't starstruck. I didn't know who you are at the time. You know what I mean? You were teaching a class, and I'm attending. I'm here to learn. And the same with Josh and Kelly up there. I just got to meet them on this level playing field, and we're brothers now. It's like I didn't even have them on that pedestal, but I put you guys on pedestals. You too. You and all these guys, because that is what I seek to be like. In so many ways. And it's not particular you in particular or them in particular. It's that culmination of all of that love that's being fostered and generated through that community, and I just want to be a part of it. And as we develop that dim purity, what we're going to do is develop essentially our own purity certification and offer like a line of products that we're 99% certain that it's not been compromised, by the political poison that's being out there. I mean, there's always going to be a little, you can find microplastics in my compost. I promise you that. You're good. You might get you might even get an aluminum can. I don't know. It's going to happen, but does that mean that the load is bad and that, you got to throw that away? That's contaminated. It's not good. I promise you don't want a lot of that, but it's part of today's life. And if we're going to utilize waste streams, and that's what we're going to have to deal with, is
no, I have the same problem. I mean, I pick when I make compost at Peach Hill, I spread it out and I pick it to get rid of any plastics or trash. Sometimes there's like little chunks of aluminum. So I go through it to the best of my ability. But even then,
and grab stuff,
Yeah, but even after all of that work, I'll see, plastic sticking out of the compost pile, and I'm like, where the hell does this come from? And it's the wind, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do. You can't you can't create sterile compost. It's just impossible. So I agree with you 100%. It's like I'm not thrilled that it's in there, but at the same time, look, what's happening in that compost pile is that plastic is getting degraded. So I am growing microbes that are degrading plastic. And if I'm giving them to you or selling them to you and you're using them, now you're going to begin to clean up your area as well. So we can always take the negative route and be like, oh God, his compost sucks. I found plastic in it. Or we can take the positive route and say, hey, look, we're doing the best we can on this end, but in many ways, the biodiversity that I'm providing you is going to have certain things that are going to benefit your own environment, your own situation. Whether you have plastics being blown in the wind from the neighbor's garbage or whatever, or if it's just coming in literally on the wind or in the rain. I mean, dude, there's microplastics on Mount Everest. So forget to be, that you can't be a purist at this point in time. You just can't. And so again, it's like being mindful and respectful to the best of your abilities, but it's too late to be a purist anymore. It really is. And a lot of people are like, oh, I got to eat all organic. Good. I'm glad you are. But you know what, dude? You ought to eat a fucking cheeseburger once in a while, because otherwise your gut is not going to be diverse enough that if, God forbid, you can't get your organic food and you're forced to eat something that's not as healthy.
I could have a bad reaction.
Right. You're going to have a problem, man. And it could be so bad that you get something like diarrhea and now you're going to be dehydrated on top of not having enough food to eat.
Being dehydrated, I need to drink.
So, again, I try to be realistic about, being a purist and not, be so fucking crazy that I drive myself insane. Like I'll still drink tap water. A lot of times I don't have a friggin' choice, right? It's not like you could go out and buy all the plastic water bottles you want, but you're getting microplastics in that, right? So what's the trade-off? The pollution that I create by buying bottled water,
carry your dog with you,
the microplastics, or just fucking drink the goddamn tap water. Or like sometimes I'm lucky at Peach Hill, they have amazing not bottled water, but the big jugs, which I'll fill up my canteen with. Which is fantastic water, but sometimes I don't have any more. I drank it all. So I have to do what I have to do. And I try to encourage people to just try to, not be so controlling in every aspect of the inputs in their life, because there's nothing you can do at this point. I mean, we had a conversation before we got on about, like everybody's getting sick now, right? Where's all this illness coming from? We don't typically get severe sicknesses this late in the season, right? And there's a lot of people out here that have gone down with this thing that I caught last week. And it's no joke. I mean, literally, I haven't been sick in 15 years. And this thing took me down, dude. Like, I was delirious. So, again, I could chalk that up to maybe my immune system reset, or maybe my immune system needed a reset. Maybe, remember, every 7 years, I believe your body has replaced every single cell in it. So you've technically evolved into a different person, even though you really haven't. You're still the same person, but biologically, you're not the same person, right? So these are the kinds of things that I don't think enough people have these conversations or even bother to think about them. But I think it's an important thing to understand that, you need to be practicing diversity in who you are and what you're being exposed to. Otherwise, you could potentially box yourself out into a corner because you were such a purist.
Yeah, for sure.
I have a great exercise that I'd love you to do. And it really helps you remember who you are and why you are the way you are. It was taught to me by another gentleman. First of all, you've got to start, being able to meditate on a next level. So again, it's not about breathing. It's not about leaving your body or astral projection or any of these things. It's really just learning to quiet your mind. And when you get to that point where you can really quiet your mind, you start asking yourself, what is the earliest memory I have? And it could be from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 50 years ago, whatever, right? But you chase back to the earliest memory that you can remember for sure and experience. And you focus in on that. And then you just totally dial in and like, okay, I remember tumbling down a hill in New Hampshire as a little boy, and it scared me because I got rolling so fast I couldn't stop myself, right? And so it left an impression on me. So I go back to that memory and I try to relive it, and then I start to say, okay, who was there? Okay, I can remember this cousin, I can remember my sister Lee, I can remember my dad and my mom, and then I remember the conversations that the adults were having, because we were there visiting my aunts and uncle. And so that sparks into more memories, and then more memories, and then more memories. And the harder you chase those memories, all of a sudden you really start to get a picture of, how you grew up, why you ended up to be the way you are. And you really unlock some of the foundation of yourself, your spirit, your being. And it's super powerful to do. And you will learn so much more about yourself. And I think this is especially important at this point in humanity, where we've been divided so fucking much. Like, couples are getting divorced at astronomical rates. Relationships, they're breaking up and getting into new relationships all the time because we're so different. And we're not united about anything anymore. And so by doing exercises like that, it really helps you connect with others and be more mindful of who you are, right? We all need to grow, and we're not growing right now as a species. We're not evolving and making ourselves better. And I mean spiritually growing, being very mindful, grateful. Like, how many people do you meet, Kip, that are grateful, right?
Gratitude, is hard to sense in people, for sure. Exactly what you're talking about. I haven't really done the work yet, but I read about and know about the work you're talking about. Joe Dispenza, I read some of his work, and he's a great mind trainer. I've done some, went into some techniques a little bit, but never got real good at just sticking to it. You know how it goes. Always busy with thinking you want to do something different, and it just gets tied up. But one of the books I read in the last few years after my divorce that really, really brought me back to that who I am thing was The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. And that book, man, that book takes a really, really, really deep dive into life and into this reality that we portray ourselves to be in, and that book was great. And then the other one was A Stranger in a Strange Land. Now you talk about another book that really, man, just gets your wheels spinning. This guy, this is a story of a guy from Mars who was born of humans who went to Mars. And I mean, it goes into all kinds of things that I'm not going to really even dive into, but that really woke me up quite a bit. And some of the notes and the things that I was doing and the downloads, that I was getting from all this. And one thing that seems crazy is that I know it's real, but it's when I started growing my hair long. Those antennae pick up information, and they are receivers. And there's a lot of stories, evidence about like the Indians early, or the Native Americans early in when the military were using them for tracking and things like that. And when they'd go to cut their hair off and make them look like everybody else, it turned them. I mean, they lost a lot of their senses.
Yep. So, spot on. Why do you think they scalp their enemies?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're taking intuition, you're taking a lot of things away whenever you're doing those kind of things. So That is definitely something that I've become aware of, and why I grew my hair long, and I keep hair on my face, and I did shave it all down in October for the first time in like 3 years. So this is from October, right after Halloween. I said I'll do it after Halloween because I was, using that as part of my Manson costume. So everybody kept telling me I look like Charlie Manson. I said, well, I guess I'm going to have to portray Charlie Manson on Halloween this year. So,
have you ever heard of the book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
I have heard of that book. I don't know much about it.
Yeah, it's an interesting. It's very it's built on innuendo, so it's not, you read through it and you don't really understand what you're reading. I mean, it's kind of a goofy story, but there's like all these underlying messages in it that once you really start to think about what you read, like you can read through it like a book, or you can read through it like a guide, right? Like, so you're learning, you read this section and then you try to rehash that section over and over again until you understand what the author was trying to say. But that might be a good book for the winter for you.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I'll write that down.
So we're way off topic here, but that's one of the reasons I love this show, is that it's not, solely required that we stay on script.
Tell me what the topic is.
So, but one of the things, you showed me an area, and I think it's on your property, but it may be adjacent, of all of this expanded shale. Remember that?
Yeah, that's actually on a property I have access to. It's not my property.
Okay. So I was thinking a lot about that material the other day, and I was like, again, early on in some of my work making compost piles, I did end up throwing like rock dust and sometimes like just chunks of rock, right? Whether it was for, again, woo-woo crystallite type stuff, or just because the rock was fractured and what we used to call, I hate to use the term rotting, but that's basically what it was. Like when they open up a quarry, say for granite or marble or something, they have to get rid of all the top rock because it's rotten. You can't slab it. You can't do much with it other than grind it up, turn it into gravel. And that material made me think like, oh my God, he's sitting on something that would be like, it's not a biochar, right? But it's some place that the microbes can actually move into those cracks and expand it more and break these things down into smaller and smaller pieces in the compost pile. Have you ever thought of using some of that?
It's like a softer pumice, maybe.
Well, again, like you noticed how you could like get your nails in there and you could break it apart, right?
Yeah.
So again, the microbes will do the same thing. They'll get in there and break it apart. They'll build their biofilms up and slowly fracture it till it's two pieces.
Yeah.
And if you fracture it over and over again in your composting process, especially with heat and cold, right? As it warms up in the composting process and then goes through cool down in the winter, you're basically what we call chemically weathering that material. And there's a lot of, some of these softer rocks, they have tons of mineral in it, but it's so much easier for the microbes to mine the mineral because it is a soft rock. And so I wanted to suggest that to you. Again, it just popped into my head. It was probably during when I was delirious as fuck with a fever last week, because we were supposed to talk last week. You were supposed to be on the podcast, and I had to cancel because I was just so fucking miserably ill. So it probably happened during that phase that I bounced back to the time that you sent me a bunch of video on that pile of rock.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a really interesting, speaking of, we're meeting mentors and, and gaining new mentors and being a mentor. Joel Salatin has recently popped onto my radar in the last several months. And his appearance in Lawrence, Kansas, just 40 miles from me, brought me to an event that was put on by Midwest Preparedness Project. And this was like the 25th event that they put on. They do it biannually. So I think 12 or 13 years they've been doing it. And essentially it's kind of homesteader, prepper type information, a lot of it's like Joel Salatin, if you know what he does, he's a regenerative farmer, and he's he's got some systems, and he's wrote a lot of books that are really geared toward really teaching people how to deal with a lot of the issues that farms deal with, raising food, raising animals, and doing it very well. So met him, and then another guy, which, man, this William Bond, that just blew my mind. This guy right here, the permaculture consultant. Boy, he's a young kid, and he has got some charisma. He is on fire. He is knowledgeable. He's been trained through the Soil Food Web School, and he does microscopy. And he's been training with Jeff Lawton, who's a big permaculture teacher. I believe Australia type is his setting. But Jeff Lawton, very renowned teacher, and he trained under him and speaks highly of him. But William, man, he did a couple of classes down there at the event. He did one where he skinned and butchered a ram. They killed it hours before, off-site, brought it there, hung it in the tree, went everywhere, all the way from skinning to having it ready to package. And it was hands-on, questions, whatever, just right there. And he's such a great teacher. And he did a composting class as well. So he was mixing his product, or he had some hay and some manure, and he was stacking it, and it was pretty dry, and it was dusty, and it was kind of getting the crowd. And so he was if anybody had a question, so I was like, I have a question. You think it'd be a good idea that if I go over and hold that hose for you while you toss that material? And he's like, yes, that's a great idea. So I went and helped him do that, and I was helping him with the pile. And the day before, he'd already known that I am a probe lover. So we had already talked about microbes and the microscopy and permaculture. So we'd already kind of kicked it around a little bit for an hour or two before that. So he kind of knew, and he's like, feel free, if you got anything to critique or add in, you just feel free. And I was like, cool. But anyway, so I ended up just basically helping him teach the class. I didn't butt in and let him do his thing. He's a great teacher. And like I say, I was watering that. I turned some of it, and I helped add a little bit of knowledge to a couple of the questions and answers, whatnot. I threw in a little bit of bits of things. So just one of those things, just like right here, right now, what I wanted to really do too is express just the gratitude for this opportunity, because what I am doing, what we are doing, Dirt-Rite, as an entity, as a group, I can't do this alone. And what I'm trying to do is so important, teaching people about composting. I know for 100% for a fact that if enough people across the planet know about composting, I'm not even saying they have to do it. If they know about it and they're knowledgeable about it, if enough people are, then the planet will not be struggling the way it is. I mean, that's just a given. Will it save the planet? Will it save the people? I mean, yes, it definitely can. If enough people know about composting, then it will. I promise you. So that is why our vision is a world at peace, love at the forefront, joy in the center. That's the vision of Dirt-Rite. And the mission, I don't have memorized mantra, but essentially it is to teach and teach people about composting and healthy, nutrient-dense food, and make it available to people so they can have access to the foods, the medicines, the materials, the compost. Some of these materials, like I was saying, the cocoa core, everything, most of the stuff we're still seeing in some of the high-end grocery stores is still peat moss based, vermiculite and things, and I'm not a fan. It's like, as you preach, the peat moss is not renewable. Vermiculite probably cuts the shit out of nematodes. Perlite, I mean, yeah, what is it, So pumice, we've sourced some pumice from New Mexico, and we're starting to use that for mixes. We've sourced the agri-cocoa from Frank out in California that's not compressed, not trash, not sawdust, and we're making those things available because I can't find them around here. I need them. Why don't these people need them? So that's logical that we make them available. And yes, do we profit enough to where I can make a living and get away from doing concrete work, and where I can do this stuff 100% of the time? Am I trying to retire? Am I trying to build or buy yachts and go fly around with gold chains. No, I'm not trying to do any of that. And so these platforms, these opportunities, those help with the notoriety that is necessary to be able to make these claims. Like, hey, we've checked out this food source. I have this problem too. I can't find good food. So, hey, I've been really looking, and Sam over here, he's got some great beef. He uses nothing but regenerative practices on his ground. We know that he doesn't pump antibiotics into his food. This is a great source. Now we can make the connections, whatever, either we offer it or we put people together, and then we grow some of the stuff. We have the soils available. We have the products available, the wood chips. Just like I said, not all wood chips are going to get crafted into fire compost. We don't have the time or right now to make every single product be premium. And will it be? We really don't know a lot of times, because like these ratios, this pile might heat up 7 or 8 or 9 times, and well, we might have forgot about it a couple of times. Maybe I burn off some of the great biology. I don't know, but hey, I'm scoping it out. It's pretty great. This other pile, we really didn't get to do nothing to it. Moisture levels were fair, just didn't get time. Did it do great things? Yeah, it's probably great for top dressing your garden or something with, you know what I mean? So it's got a lower value, but it's available and it's clean. It's good. You know what I mean? It's been certified DEM pure, that'll be the goal. And I guess we can probably say that when we are certified DEM pure, so, but Midwest Preparedness, the William Bond. So he said this dude has like 36,000 viewers. That's not, whatever. I don't know what that means, but it means that he's getting the word out, right? And he's doing this thing. He puts up a video and he might get like 5,000 views in a couple hours. Well, he's like, hey, we're coming back in the fall. Can I come out to your place and we'll shoot live? I'm like, well, of course you can, yeah, obviously. Yeah, you can come on over and do that. And then like with this opportunity open up, and then Ken saying, hey, let's have conversations in the cafe, man, this is going to help hold me accountable, right? If I'm going to do the work, I can't just talk about it. I got to do the work. And then that proof of work, right? What is the YouTube? What are the views? What is all the noise about, right? Am I putting out the right frequency? Are you guys tuning in? Is the transmission being completed? Is the world aligning and allowing all of this to take place and opening doors? I see them opening everywhere around me. It's a beautiful thing. I get I get excited and I get on a rant, and it's like, back to love. That's the poop song. I wish I could have recorded this guy I met down there. Gary, he's a wild man. He's a great dude. He owns nothing. He just farms. He just helps people farm, and he farms. But he sung this song, and it was his poop song, and it was basically about composting. And what I got out of it, he said, it's yours. You can have it. And I said, well, will you sing it again? No. And that was it. And I done lost the song. But what I got out of it is compost the military, pharmaceutical, industrial complex back to love, living organisms, vibrant ecosystems. It's like acronym thing, love, living organisms, vibrant ecosystems. But we're going to compost the pharmaceutical complex, compost them back to love. I thought that was great. I just had to share that for sure, because that's what we want to do. And like through these platforms and through this energy, and hopefully I can come up with some ways to, I'll try to be educational. I'll try to be inspirational, but I doubt I'm entertaining, but maybe that'll come later. I don't know. So Ken said that my light was lit though. Ken, how'd you say that?
He'll pop on in a minute here. He's probably
one lit candle can light many without ever diminishing its own light. That's awesome, Ken. And at the event, one of my notes at the Preparedness Project, let your light shine before men so they see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Where 2 or more are gathered in my name, there I am in their midst. 5 of you will put 1,000 to flight. And that is just the power of the multiplication that's coming through goodness. And when we're on the right path and we're in alignment and we're doing good works, doors open up. And the prophecy that I received on Good Friday blew my mind. These ladies were knocking on the door, and I'm just playing around, or I'm just doing things. I say playing around. That's basically because that's what my fiance kind of claims I'm always doing, is playing around, which I am. I get, doing things. Anyway, these gals knock on the door, and they delivered this message, and I wish I remembered the verse, but basically they said that you look around and you will see no more evil. And I was just, it didn't really hit me until after they left. And it's a little deeper than that, if I could find my notes on that. But it basically just, it really lit this thought and this way of thinking that, and the wavelength, the frequency there again, if we walk into say something happens, you stub your toe and you're getting ready to go in the store. Now you take it out on everybody around you, right? If you have this, is that so? And that's another thing I learned in the way of the peaceful word. Is that so? So the house is on fire. Is that so? Not this reactive, like crazy, like, what are we going to do? We have to do something. If you can analyze the situation and real quickly discern, and discernment is really key in everything that we're doing, is being able to discern right from wrong, good from evil, emergency from non-emergency, whatever. It's like, can I do anything about the situation? If you can't, then don't freak out. Calm down, speak good, it's all going to be all right. Everything happens for a reason. Something good will come of this. This restaurant burned down. Well, I've been kind of wanting to move on and make a change in my life. It gives me an opportunity to break out and go do this other thing. It's, just like the passing of loved ones. It's like, well, all these people came together and I haven't seen you in how long? And you bring joy to me. Being in your presence is a gift. That's a good thing that comes from that. Sometimes it's the only good thing, but if that's all it was, see that, grab onto it and bring that in as your joy, let joy reign.
No, that makes all the sense in the world. I mean, I was blessed that my mother taught me that at a young age. No matter if it's good or bad, if it's good, there's still going to be some bad that comes out of it. And if it's bad, there's still going to be good that comes out of it. It's just up to us to fucking recognize what we want to focus on and not just focus on the negativity. So yeah. It's words to live by for sure. Raised vibration.
Man, and it gets really deep. And I've really come to the conclusion that the kingdom of heaven is within. It's people just take for cliche, that the foundational truth that's instilled in us. And we just, we have to remember, we create our own reality. And that's what it is about, is remembering. It's like all these things come at us, and it's like, sometimes you already have heard something over and over and over, but this time it just, a light bulb comes on and you're like, boom, wow, that's okay. That's a truth. And it's impactful, and you hang on to it, and it lights another spark, and off you go, I've got a lot of stuff in my brain. I've got a lot of stuff going on. I don't and can't do it alone. I love having Jessie by my side. She grounds me in a lot of ways. She can make it also, men and women, there's a yin and yang thing going on that I haven't figured that stuff out yet. So I've got to be more intentional to really find ways to include her, because working as much as I do, and then also building Dirt-Rite. And man, yesterday, like I fly by the seat of my pants, typically, like a schedule. People call for concrete. It's like, hey, what's your schedule? It's like, man, sometimes I can't make a schedule out more than 2 or 3 days. Like, we'll have stuff that we know is coming up that we got to work in or whatever. There is a schedule, but boy, to just start nailing, putting things on a calendar and trying in a concrete world, it's really tough. And then trying to do all those things on this farm Dirt-Rite, putting them in is really tough as well. So that's something I know I've got to get better at, is organizing and just staying on track and keeping focused. So I've been trying to utilize some more tools. That I've kind of started playing with the Chat GPT. That's a interesting fair right there. I will say.
So let's talk a little bit more about the launch. When do you think you're actually going to launch Dirt-Rite? Is it this fall, or?
I would think within a month or two.
Nice.
It's launched in essence. I mean, I right now, what I have is just information, I guess. What certification do I have? Well, I don't know. I guess we're working on that, right? I will have the microscopy certification soon. And then, and those are just some tools that'll help strengthen the notoriety. But, is it there already? I'm already consulting with people to some extent, or trying. We're working, my partner and I, Seth, are working on that. We've actually started a company, or an LLC. It's Save the World, STW. And that's Seth's initials, STW, so Save the World. So it's actually, that started. And, we haven't started running business through it yet. But yeah, man, I don't know. It's like, what technically opens the door? It's like, I guess a product is where it really is going to start, when I am able to bag up whatever product I decide to bag up. And I thought, like I said, just to get the launch, the Agricoco is a great one. I mean, I've kind of talked with Frank about being able to use the product and offer the product here, so basically a wholesaler, that's a product, right, available right away. And then extracts, I'm not really ready to just start sending compost out the door, but we are working with a couple of small farmers right now with some extracts, and working to get our spray rig. It's like this close. So we've got a customer on the line wanting 30 acres of alfalfa sprayed. And it's like so much going on. I don't have the capacity right now. And we were on the cusp, and it just wasn't enough. The diaphragm, I've got to get some different nozzles, and we've got to do some tinkering with the spray. Just not there yet, but it's like on the cusp. I don't know. It's happening like any minute, any day right now. And like I say, these kind of things, I know this whole platform stuff is going to assist in the launch. I know that. So it's going to actually slow me down too, to some extent. So I have to get really better at putting together information and putting it out there, and just get to where we can really just reach more people.
Well, that was the goal, dude, was to, get you on board and get your name out there so people know the work that you're doing, because it's important.
Yeah. I mean, Midwest Microbes, where can you get BioComplete compost in the Midwest? I can't find any. At all. So it's going to very soon. I mean, like I said, in extract form, it's basically available now to a small scale. I can create extracts and send them out the door. But as far as getting them applied, right now I'm down to I got a spray wand, but it covers quite a bit. I can do some stuff, but I'm doing good to keep producing the lot. We've got a few acres access. So, and that's another thing. The property that we're using could end up, it will potentially go on the market soon. So hopefully we're in a position where we can acquire the property at the time. Right now we're just blessed to be able to use the property, and that's going to work out good there. It's got a well, and so we've just got to hook up some water lines, and we've got some ideas on how we're going to do our watering.
Gotcha. That's great.
it'll all come together. Like I say, I went down just yesterday. I'll be putting up some more YouTube videos on where I went down, and some of the material I mentioned, the materials were kind of getting moist. So, because we had them stacked there for nearly a week. So, and you know how, like I say, when manure lays in piles and things, it starts to, so when I pull back, you know, you start to see the actino really ramp up, the white. So
Yep.
just give it a stir and keep it, try to keep it from going too hot too long till I can get them all put together here in the next day or two. And we'll see what kind of magic comes out of these things. And
well, you know, again, I think that the important thing to understand is that compost is a process. It's not an end result. It's not a product. The end result of composting is MOAM, mineral associated organic matter, right? That's where the material is just caked with minerals. Like, you can look at it. I put it up a post on IG about it. And so, and then in the beginning you have GOM, ground organic matter, right? Is GOM no good? No, it's still good. It's just, it's not ideal for mature plant or immature plants. It's fine for mature plants because it's still going to break down. It's still going to end up turning into mineral associated organic matter at some point in time. And biocomplete or biointensive compost, that's somewhere in the middle. Like, I have stuff now that's about a year old, and when you scope it, there's hardly any life. It's just bacteria. There's some fungal I feed. But if you let it sit in the water for 24 hours, and you come back and scope it again, it's loaded with organisms. So again, it's like you have slow release, you have fast release, you have more on the carbon source. Like, if I take that mineral associated organic matter and I add water to it, it's essentially liquid carbon. Like, it stays suspended. It looks like chocolate water, right? So it stays in a suspension form for a long period of time, 3-4 days before it falls out. And then it becomes aquatic snow. In other words, you just tap that jar and it goes poof, back up into suspension again. All of these things have value. They are ideal for different circumstances. Like, I don't want to spray biocomplete, extract onto crusty soil. I'll kill everything. But I can spray the chocolate water on that crusty soil and loosen it up, and then apply a biocomplete or intensive extract. That'll work fantastic. There's certain circumstances that I'm not as concerned about getting the protozoa there. I know there's protozoa there. I know they're fine. Hasn't been any synthetic use in a long time. Plants aren't doing well. Soil's a little bit too compacted. How do I break it up? Well, now I'm more concerned with like a facultative, like a rotifer. He's going to get in there and bust it up, trying to get all those bacteria. He'll loosen it up. And then once it's loosened up, then I can apply my liquid carbon. And that's going to provide a food source for all the biology. Again, at the end of the day, they need carbon. The carbon is the essential part of the food chain. So, it doesn't matter. It's not all about what this organic matter is. It's all about how you're using it. And, again, being responsible about the way you're using it and not using it in the wrong way where you're not going to get a reaction and you're going to be upset and frustrated with yourself. And that just takes time and experience. All right. So we've surpassed the hour and a half. We've got 5 questions. Ken, why don't we go ahead and fire those up?
Sure. Sounds good. Actually, I want to show Cheryl's comment here first. The bad stuff, it's like in compost, even though something bad happens to your pile, you have useful information to share with others so they learn from you. And it's all about sharing that. And that's what, Kip is starting to do on Dirt-Rite, is share this information. And I appreciate, what you're doing, Kip, very much. And that's why I want to have you on Conversations in Ken's Cafe, because in sharing, other people can learn from what you're doing. But so I just wanted to point out Cheryl's statement there. So let's go into the questions. this comes back from the beginning of the show. You were talking about the wood you're using. So what types of wood are you using for your windrow composting?
There's no way to tell what all of the trees that grow around here. Most of our wood chips come from a company called Asplund, and they go around and trim basically like when the electric lines are starting to get overcrowded by they're the guys that go in and whack all that stuff off. So typically they're dealing with ends of the tree, what is considered the ramial section of the tree, where there's going to be a lot of green, leafy, and then I don't know a lot. I'm learning more, and Leighton probably knows more about, but in that material, there's just a lot more biology in that new life type growth. And so, and they rarely even chip anything larger than 3 or 4 inches. And it's going to be, some of these trees are going to be sick and dying. Some of them are going to be in great health. Some of them, we're getting everything. We don't know what it is. Sometimes we can tell by the smells that, oh, they had a lot of cedar in that one, or we can see the evergreen, a lot of evergreen, or we can see different things, but really there's not much way of telling. So yeah, it's going to be a little tricky, but like I say, we're seeing great results so far in different piles. It's all different diversities.
And guys, just so you know it, when an arborist goes out and they chip all this stuff, they actually end up paying to dump it. So if you contact your local arborists, you can very often get wood chips for free that you can use as even just using as a top layer of mulch. You remember, never leave your soil bare. Even your compost, once you put that compost on, put a layer on top of it so that compost stays moist. You're going to get a lot better effect from it.
Absolutely.
Very wise words, Ken. Very wise words. Because otherwise it dries out and blows away. You lose your biology.
Yeah. And you need that organic material, because then once you put that organic material on top, the biology that's in your compost can move up and start eating that and making more compost right on top, right in place.
In situ.
Yes, in situ. Can Kip and Leighton talk more about EM1 and how we can use it? How does it look under the microscope?
That's a great question. Kip, you want to start off?
Well, I'll tell you, yeah, EM. I just, when Cotamoc was on the last time was when I've always been interested in it, but it really set home with me. I went ahead and ordered some, and I started batching it and using it probably in the last 6 months or so. And what it looks like under the microscope is you definitely can see the yeast and a lot of the lactobacillus, the rods. And I still have yet to figure out what the purple non-sulfur bacteria look like. I see up to 400. I don't know that you can really identify them, through that or not. They're a cocci. They're just a standard cocci bacteria, most likely is the way I take it. So I don't know how to identify them, but there's definitely cocci bacteria along with those others when you look at it under a microscope. And what I'm going to know is it just seems to stabilize anything I put it in. It just and back like to the rainwater thing. I did dump some in another barrel that I knew it was going to take me a while to use. And it held for a long time. They just seem to add oxygen, maybe. They're doing something in there. The EM has just really, really made a difference. And I've been including it in everything because it's so affordable too. You can multiply it with molasses. It's really, really good stuff.
Well, the interesting thing about that product is that it's basically a poop loop. So everybody's feeding off the other guy's waste. And so it has this unique ability to function in both anaerobic and aerobic soils and everything in between. purple sulfur bacteria is really, really good for plant health. So it's thought to be able to take in position in energetic relationship with the plant. And so there's a lot of benefits. And of course, lactose are also good at fighting off fungal infections. So they're also like a plant superfood. So it's a wonderful product. I think that, it works best in conjunction with other things. I mean, it works on its own, but I think it's more effective, especially when you're mixing it with like some reverse compost. Because again, think about, biosymbiosis or horizontal gene transfer, where everybody's working together to stabilize their community, their environment, whether they've just been introduced to it or if they're already there existing. So again, it's a wonderful product. It has a shelf life, so you don't have to worry about it going anaerobic or losing its strength over time. But again, I'm a big fan of using it as part of a toolbox, so not just by itself.
Well, and one of the things that you have to consider is the effective microbes can live in both an oxygenated environment and one that doesn't have oxygen. So think of it as a transport division, guys, a bunch of truck drivers that are going down into the lower areas, picking up the minerals, etc., from where other biology can't go, and then transporting it up into that oxygenated environment that your biology that's building the cells in your plant need that material. So think of it as a transport division, because it can go from oxygenated to non-oxygenated environments. So I think that's in some ways one of the keys to the effective microorganisms, is being that mid-range that can go back and forth. I don't know if that helps at all.
Yeah, because those yeast and those lactose, they persist in weeks later, months later. Like I've got some, and I've extended my second. Like I took the first batch I made, extended it, and I had a little biochar in it. And so I'll tell you what we will do is, if you want, we'll put on the microscope in the cafe, Ken, and I can put some EM under the microscope, and we can take a look at it. We could compare some factory EM, straight from their bottle. I won't even grab it, but straight from their bottle. Well, gone ahead and extended it. I've got some that I've extended just with molasses, or I've got some straight from the bottle, but it's pretty goopy. You can't hardly see into it. But that really helps. But we can do that.
That would be cool, because people can see. People are visual. That's why YouTube's so great, is we can visually see people talking. And I used to read a lot, but now I watch videos and listen to audiobooks, because it's a lot easier to listen for me personally. Anyway.
Yeah.
So our last question is from Perpetual, and he wanted to know what rocks you guys were talking about. You were talking about the stratified layers, the stuff on top broken up.
So it was basically like an expanded shale. So there's schist, there's shales. These tend to be rocks that are easily broken, easily crumble. You whack them with a hammer and they just disintegrate, right? And so they still have a lot of mineral in them. There's still a lot of value to them as far as like providing mineral to the bacteria to digest. And so the easier and softer the rocks are, the easier they are to break down. So I was encouraging Kip to add some of that expanded shale to his composting process, because not only does it add aeration, but it also is going to provide mineral content. Like some of the best compost products I've ever seen, they include rock dust in the composting process. So they're adding mineral powders and rock dust from whether it's bluestone or azomite or freaking basalt. It doesn't matter. They're adding these in as part of the process, and you're getting a good nutritional value when you test it for chemistry. So there's definitely a benefit to doing that. Now, it does increase your bulk density, which means that it's going to be heavier than just a regular plant-based compost. But the benefits outweigh the need for not being able to get as much on a truck.
That fan looks like a hat.
And maybe that's what you need to add in for, I can't remember the name of the company I think it's Agrumans that, we're worried about the weight. Maybe they just need to add in some soft rock phosphate, or that to bring their weight up. But
their problem is the opposite. They don't want high bulk density. They want it to be like 800 pounds per cubic yard, so that they can fit all 40 yards on a walking floor truck. Because when they show up with a farmer and it's only 3/4 full, the farmer complains, like, where's the rest of my compost? They don't understand that there's probably more value in that less load, because there's more mineral value to it than there is with the light fluffy stuff. But again, even perception.
Education.
Right?
Yeah, educate.
Yeah,
well, and I know I buy soft rock phosphate to put in. So Kip, if you can get it naturally, you're way ahead, because you're going to get it a lot cheaper than going out and buying a bucket of soft rock phosphate.
And that's part of our angle with Dirt-Rite, is because I'm so adamant about wild crafting and wild sourcing all of these materials. And I have equipment. I know people with quarries and who are moving big material all the time. And, just having access to that and seeing it and taking advantage of those opportunities and getting a hold of the materials when they're available, that's kind of where we're positioning ourselves. So
cool. So we did have another question come in. Does azomite really contain tons of heavy metals? I was told to throw my 4x4 bag away.
It's not the heavy metals that you're concerned about. The real value of azomite is only about, I think it's like 40% of the bag is good. The rest of it is filler. There's a lot of aluminum in it. There's a lot of shit in it that you don't need. Now, I'm not a big fan of azomite. I've moved on to other products, but I know a lot of people out there still worship the azomite, say that it provides great value to each their own, right? Some people
I like diversity
in it more so than I do.
Just use a little bit. Then, if you don't feel great about it, maybe just a tiny bit. If your heart tells you that there's something there you're needing, maybe just a cup of it goes into a yard. Who knows? You'd be surprised sometimes with just that little bit.
Perpetual has another question there, and this is something that I really like to talk about because we don't talk about it enough. There is already so much phosphorus in our soils. It's insane. I have a friend of mine that runs she's the head of the lab at Logan Labs, and we were doing a deep dive on protea, as a matter of fact, because protea are very, very phosphate sensitive. Like, they don't want any of it, or a fraction, tiny little bit. And my concern was that when I applied my compost extract to the plants, that because I have phosphate solubilizing bacteria, I would solubilize a bunch of the pool and kill the plant. And so I was, talking at length with her about phosphorus and soil pools. And basically she said, Leighton, we don't need it. We need the biology that releases it. She goes, if I do a full on phosphorus test, the number is going to be like in the hundreds of thousands of parts per million. It's crazy how much phosphorus builds up. Again, in its organic phase, it's almost impossible for anything other than a phosphate solubilizing bacteria to break it free. So again, this is one of the reasons why I recommend fish brew, because same with nitrogen. Organic nitrogen is another one that there's just so much built up in the soil, but unless you have a solubilizer that can break it open so that it can be absorbed by the bacteria, you're not going to get it. There was a guy in Ohio that did a real deep dive on all different soils across the country, and was just like, why are we spraying nitrogen? we don't need it. Well, the problem is farmers are pushing, right? They want to have 300 bushel per acre. And so they'll spend money on nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium because they can see that the more of this shit they put on, the bigger the yields that they get. And they're all so focused on yield and not dollar or profit per acre that they're missing the whole point. So they continue to add this stuff to a pool that's already overflowing. But the problem is, again, is that only a fraction of the nitrogen they put on is actually being used. Again, it gets into electrons and subatomic particles, but the bottom line is that some of that nitrogen, even though it's in a synthetic form, is going to have an electron that's missing or spinning in the wrong rotation, and therefore it cannot be utilized by the plant. And so it just builds up in the pool. But if you have these specific bacteria that do these solubilizing activities, you could release all of the friggin' nutrients you could possibly imagine out of your soil. And this is exactly why we have such a big problem with our water quality. It's because of the nitrogen and the phosphorus. When they get into an aquatic ecosystem, that becomes available almost immediately. And guess who feeds on it? The algae. And at the night, the algae dies, falls to the bottom, and creates these hypoxic zones, which kill the fish. And it's a repeat. Every time the sun comes out, the algae explodes, and every night the sun sets, the algae dies back and creates another layer of these, dangerous, low oxygen environments. I mean, that's why there's no rotifers left. No, I'm going to shut up before I get on.
Well, actually, I think that you covered this question, where to get the bacteria cheaply, and it's from water that fish live in, because that's what Fish Brew is all about, is collecting the biology that's anaerobic, because that's what's releasing the phosphorus. Is it protozoa?
So, some of them are anaerobes, but most of them are more like facultative, because they can live from 1 part per million all the way to 10 parts per million. So again, this is why I was like a huge fan of fish manure, because it has that ability to scale in and out of aerobic and anaerobic environments. So it's so beneficial. So perpetual, I mean, the best place in the world is to find a healthy creek or a river or a lake that you can see that there's a lot of different organisms, especially if you see minnows and baby fish. That's a really good sign, because you know that there's rotifers and there's others, what we call multi-cell organisms that feed during that initial phase where it goes from larvae to fingerling. And the great way to collect that stuff is either like through the algae. So you collect some of the algae along the edge, or some of the aquatic plants. Again, be kind. Don't just go in there and rape the environment. Also, natural sea sponges. You can take a sponge, get it wet, tie a rock to it, and throw it in and let it sink down, and then come back a couple weeks later, just like a fish filter.
And that's the point: is if you don't have access to that stuff, the fish filter, have a fish tank, use that fish filter to get that biology.
Yeah, and the benefit of looking at the fish tank. I mean, who doesn't like looking at a fish tank? It's something very magical about it. It is a little bit more work than say a cat or a dog, but the benefits are fantastic if you're growing plants.
So we had a couple of more questions quickly here. If I was to use oyster shell, how much or do I need dolomite lime?
Well, oyster shells, you really need the flour, because it takes so long for those guys to break down. And again, you have dolomitic lime and you have calcitic lime, right? So you have to be careful when you apply those. If you apply, I think it's calcitic lime in an environment where your temperatures are above 90 degrees, you can cause shock to the plants. You can kill the plants. So I think that's the one that you want to use, the dolomitic lime. Whereas in the fall, spring, and winter, you want to use the calcitic lime. to lower the pH or raise the pH, whatever. I'm still sick. I can't even think straight.
And Kip, I think you were showing a jar of lime that's in behind you there.
No, my fish tank. I don't know if you guys.
Oh, okay.
The fish tank right there. I'm about to clean it out after we visit here this evening. I'm going to be cleaning that out. It's due, so
Cool.
I'm going to make some good AMOs there.
There you go.
Yep.
There you go.
Are either of you guys understand or have used the Redmond's conditioner?
I wonder if that's like for fish tanks. I think they're.
I think Redmond's is a soil conditioner that you can buy online. I think I've seen that.
No, I
haven't.
I've never.
You wouldn't believe how many nematodes I found in this stuff. I took some of the probe cakes, is what I call them. After we screened from the time machine, we didn't even get into the whole time machine in the wash. I've told I've been extracting with the washing machine, Leighton.
Yes.
Yeah. So the screenings that are left, I took and I threw some oatmeal in there, and within a week there were over 100 nematodes in one slide.
One view.
Yeah, well, one slide. I mean, as I
did
my nematode count, there were well over 100, and I started with like a couple. There were like a few, maybe.
Another great food for nematodes is distillers or brewers waste. For whatever reason, I used to put that stuff on my compost piles, and I would just get record number nematodes.
Cool.
Yeah, we're pretty short on nematodes in a lot of our piles. Those wood chip piles tend to be a little short on the nematodes, so I inoculate them pretty regularly. I'm starting to get to where I'm seeing one or two, in a slide, which all it takes is one to be biocomplete. One is quite a few. If you're seeing one, then there's a lot, and I don't know the exact numbers. I haven't ran enough full number counts through the SMAP. That's the app that we use to count the organisms. So I ran a few, but still got to run some more actual numbers to start knowing the counts.
So Leighton, we're going to do one last question. This is more probably for you. I was looking at aquaponic blue tilapia for fish. Anyone have any experience with those?
Yeah, those are badass. If you really want to go down the rabbit hole of tilapia, there's a company down in Arizona. I think they're pretty much this main supplier for tilapia in America. They bring them in from Africa, and they have the blues, the blacks, the reds, the multicolors. They just have a full spectrum of all the different types of tilapia. They're freaking beautiful. They're beautiful. I think the blues tend to be a little bit smaller than some of the other colored ones. I'm not sure why. It's probably something to do with their genetic makeup. And if you can't find that facility down in Arizona, reach out to New Mexico. What is it called? Santa Fe Community College, and ask for a gentleman named Charlie Schultz, and he'll be happy to give you information on where to get the fingerlings, so that you can bring them up, or someone local to you where you can get brood stock that's already big enough that you can just grow out. Because remember, when you start with the fingerlings, you don't have a lot of nutrient cycling happening because they're so small. So you really need to have the bigger fish to really produce a lot of manure. Just keep that in mind. But yeah, the blue ones are spectacular. I had a few in my tank.
Cool.
Culture system. All right. Well, it looks like we've wrapped a full hour. There was more that I wanted to get into with you, Kip. So we'll probably have to have you back on again in the future. Maybe let's do this fall when you're really flying along, or maybe late fall, so that your concrete business has slowed down a little and you'll have some more time to really play with what you're doing so far.
Yeah, I'd love to follow up, and I'd love to stay keeping people posted through the cafe. That's great.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we're gonna have you on a regular basis, because it's the growth as you progress forward and seeing it from the start to the finish, like you've built so many beds, you're doing all these different things. And guys, check out Kip's channel, Dirt-Rite on YouTube, because you're going to learn and you're going to watch things grow and expand and be part of the experiments as they happen, so you can learn as well. It's all knowledge, guys. So, Kip, are you going out to any more of these conferences in the near future where people can hook up with you?
I haven't scheduled anything yet. No,
Yeah.
no, I won't. So we'll figure out what's happening, what's coming up next. Yeah, I'll probably the next event I go to, I'll probably potentially have a microscope set up and have some samples that people can look at and things like that. So that's
Cool.
some of these cannabis events that come up is where I'm going to probably be popping in real soon.
Okay, well, keep us updated on your Instagram account, guys. So follow Kip's Instagram account as well, and those links are in the description. So then you can find where he's going to be, and then you guys can meet up.
Yeah, he's done a wonderful job, Sil, as I've known him, watching him, expand his property like crazy. How much more garden space, beds, and everything else that he's done over the last year plus since
just really in the last year and a half. I mean, we bought the property 3 years ago and had a lot of hardscape things to do even before we got into some of that. So just in the last year and a half or so, a lot of these beds are being built and produced, and greenhouses and walapinis and hoop houses and all the fun stuff. So
keeps
going. It's fun. Treat it as fun. Enjoy it.
I do. Absolutely. Yeah. It's invigorating to me.
I really appreciate you coming on today, Kip, and giving us 2 hours of your time and having some fun with philosophy and other attributes of composting and compost making. And Ken, as always, thank you so much for all behind the scene work that you put into this to make this happen every week. And love and respect to the audience as well.
Much gratitude. Thank you.
All right, guys, we'll see you on Wednesday with Andy Lopez. And other than that, hopefully the ladies will be back on Thursday with Chiropractic is Sexy. So you guys want to learn more about the body and what's happening with your bodies. That's a show you're not going to want to be not watching. You're definitely going to want to watch those episodes. So, guys, see you on Wednesday.